In this video lecture, we are going to solve questions from Payload, Weight and Balance Sums. The source will be Keith Williams. So we will be solving Payload sums from Keith Williams' book. So let's begin with question number 1. What is the maximum allowable traffic load if maximum takeoff mass is so and so, zero fuel mass is so and so, landing mass, dry operating mass, takeoff fuel, and trip fuel? Now, before we see how to solve this question, for all the traffic load questions, you have to follow the steps that I have written here. So, maximum traffic load or payload calculations, remember this point. In the examination, you will be required to calculate weight of the traffic load that can be carried, the allowable takeoff mass. Now, you will have to calculate the takeoff mass with which you can take off, right? So, it will be the lowest of zero fuel mass, maximum zero fuel mass plus takeoff fuel, regulated takeoff mass, or regulated landing mass plus fuel used in flight, that is your trip fuel. So you have to calculate the values for each of them, and the lowest value of them will be used or will be used as your takeoff mass or will be considered takeoff mass. To find out the regulated takeoff mass or restricted takeoff mass with which you can take off or do your flight, there are two steps you have to follow. The step number 1 is draw a table of 3 columns. So you have to draw 3 columns, one for takeoff, one for landing, and one for zero fuel. In the column of takeoff mass, you have to write the value which is given in the question. It can be the least of or the the value lesser value of maximum structural takeoff mass or performance limited takeoff mass. The value will be given in the question. If both values are given, maximum structural takeoff mass as well as performance limited takeoff mass, consider that value which is lesser. Okay, otherwise, if ramp mass is given, subtract taxi fuel from that ramp mass in order to get your takeoff mass. So in the first column, you will be writing this takeoff values directly given in the question or calculated. Majority of the times you will be given the maximum structural takeoff mass or performance limited takeoff mass directly in the question. Just copy that. In the column number 2, you will first write landing mass, maximum landing mass given in the question or performance limited landing mass given in the question, and you will add trip fuel, nothing but your flight fuel, to that landing mass. So when you add trip fuel to your landing mass, you get takeoff fuel. Okay, so this is the second way through which or by which you can find takeoff mass. In the third column, you have to write the zero fuel mass, maximum zero fuel mass given to you, and you have to add fuel on board or takeoff fuel to maximum zero fuel mass. Now, fuel on board is nothing but the fuel in your fuel tanks, in the fuel tanks of aircraft when it is ready for takeoff. That means when pilot stops aircraft on the threshold of the runway in order to start its takeoff roll and then take off. So that is the fuel on board in the fuel tanks, or also called takeoff fuel. So through this, by these 3 methods, you will get 3 different takeoff values. Over here, the takeoff value will be different than from here, and this takeoff value will be different from these two. Then out of all these 3 takeoff values, you have to take that takeoff value which is the least of them. So the pilot chooses the least value of all 3 for his takeoff, and this takeoff value will be called RTOM, okay, regulated or restricted takeoff mass. Landing mass can also be found out from the question. They may directly give you maximum structural landing mass or performance limited landing mass. So if both are given, you have to choose the landing mass which is lesser of the 2 values. Okay, and to that you have to add flight fuel or trip fuel. This is your step number 1. In your step number 2, you are going to use the formula that we always use, which is takeoff mass equals to dry operating mass plus takeoff fuel plus payload. Now in the step 1, you get 3 takeoff values. Out of those 3 values, you select that value which is the lowest, and that lowest value you will put in place of takeoff mass. Dry operating mass will be given to you. Takeoff fuel or fuel on board will also be given to you. And when you know these three values, you can easily calculate payload traffic load. Okay, so this is your step number 2. Now following all these steps, that is step number 1 and step number 2, we will start solving each and every question from Keith Williams. And as we solve the questions, I'll explain to you how to go about every question. Every question may require a different approach. So let's check question number 1 to begin with. So what did the step number 1? What is our step number 1? Step number 1 is to make 3 columns, one for takeoff mass, one for landing mass, and one for zero fuel mass. Now in the column number 1, that is the one for your takeoff mass, you will have to write the value for takeoff. Now over here they have given maximum takeoff mass is 1,67,000 kg. So I am writing here 167 divided by 1,67,000 kg. I am dividing by 1000. So for simple calculations. So 167. Landing mass is 1,08,000. So I am writing 108. And to landing mass we will have to add trip fuel or flight fuel to get takeoff mass. So trip fuel is given 33,000 kg. So divide by 1000 we get answer 33. This is what I will do in all the sums. Divide by 1000 to make easy calculations easier. Next, zero fuel mass is 1,02,000. So I'll write 102. And to that you are going to add fuel on board or takeoff fuel. So fuel on board is given or takeoff fuel is 37,500 kg. 37,000 divided by 37,500 divided by 1000 is 37.5. So add 37.5 to that. Now the total 108 plus 33 is 141. 102 plus 37.5 is 139.5, and this is the same 167. So these are the three takeoff values that we have now: 67, 141, 139.5. Now the step number 1 says out of these three takeoff values, select that takeoff value which is the lowest. So which is the lowest takeoff value? The lowest takeoff value is 139.5. 139.5. So this is your takeoff mass. Now let's go to step number 2. Step number 2 is direct formula. Takeoff mass is equal to DOM plus payload plus takeoff fuel or fuel on board. Substitute the values. In place of takeoff mass, you are going to write 139.5. In place of dry operating mass, you are going to write the value 63,000 kg. So 63,000 divided by 1000 is 63. Load you have to calculate, or traffic load. Takeoff fuel is 37.5. So payload equals to 139.5 minus 63 63 plus 37.5. So 139.5 is equal to 140. So 163 plus 37.5 is 105. So answer is 39. So 39 is nothing but 39,000 kg. Okay, so the correct answer is bravo, 39,000 kg. Step 1, draw three columns, find out the three takeoff values, choose the takeoff value which is the least. Step 2, substitute the values in the formula. Simple. Let's go to question number 2 now. 2. What is the maximum allowable traffic load if takeoff mass is 1,75,000, zero fuel mass is 1,22,000, maximum landing mass is 1,10,000, dry operating mass is 65,000, takeoff fuel is 39,000, trip fuel is 34,000. So let's start. Step number 1, draw three columns, one for takeoff mass, the second one for landing mass, and the third one for zero fuel mass. Now in the takeoff mass, you will write the takeoff value, which is maximum 1,75,000 kg. So I am writing 175. In the landing mass, write the landing mass, which is 1,10,000. So 110 plus trip fuel 34,034. Zero fuel mass column, write the zero fuel mass 122. Addition to that, you have to do add takeoff fuel 39,000 or 39, right? So let's add them. 110 plus 34 is 144. 122 plus 39 is 161. And in the takeoff column, 175 is going to remain the same. So now we have three takeoff values, 175, 144 and 161. Okay, so choose that takeoff value which is the least. So the least among them is 144. So our takeoff mass is going to be 144. Okay, so with this takeoff mass we are going to depart. That is a takeoff. So next step number 2 is use the formula, direct formula, which is takeoff mass DOM, dry operating mass plus payload plus fuel on board or takeoff fuel. Substitute the values. Takeoff mass is 144, dry operating mass is 65,000, so 65. Payload we have to calculate. Fuel on board is 39,000. Fuel on board is also known as takeoff fuel. So 39,000, write 39. So payload equals to 144 minus 65 plus 39. 144 minus 65 plus 39 is 104. Payload equals to 40 or 40,000 kg. Okay, so this is your answer. So the correct answer is option Charlie, 40,000 kg. So this is how you do the sum. Let's go to question number 3. What is the maximum allowable traffic load again? If takeoff mass, zero fuel mass, landing mass, DOM, takeoff fuel, trip fuel are given to you. Step 1, draw three columns, one for takeoff mass, another for landing mass, the third one for zero fuel mass. So takeoff mass is maximum 2 lakhs. So write 200 Zero landing mass is 1,75,000, right? 175. Add trip fuel to that, which is 55,000 or 55. Zero fuel mass is 1,50,000. So write 150. Add takeoff fuel or fuel on board, which is 65,000 or 65. So 175 plus 55 is 230. 150 plus 65 is 215. So these are the three takeoff values: 200, 230, and 215. So out of these three takeoff values, you have to select that one which is the lowest. So here the lowest takeoff value is 200. So you are going to take off with 200, that is 200, or 200 is nothing but our lakh kg. Okay, you can so what I have done is 2 lakh kg. I have divided 2 lakh by 1000. So in order to get 200 value, so that simplifies our calculations, make our calculations faster. So step number 2, use the direct formula. Takeoff mass equals to payload plus DOM, dry operating mass, plus takeoff fuel or fuel on board. So takeoff mass is 200. Payload we have to calculate. Dry operating mass is 100 and takeoff fuel is 65,000, or fuel on board is 65,000 or 65. So payload will be equal to 200 minus 165, which is equal to 35 or 35,000 kg. Multiply by 1000. So the correct answer is option delta. Option delta, 35,000 kg. Let's go to question 4. What is the maximum allowable traffic load? Now, if performance limited takeoff mass is given to you and maximum structural takeoff mass is given to you. So one is performance limited, another is structurally limited. So what is the step number 1? Draw 3 columns, one for takeoff mass, another for landing mass, another for zero fuel mass. Now in the column of takeoff mass, you have to write that takeoff value which is the least of the takeoff value which is going to be the least of maximum structural takeoff mass and performance limited takeoff mass. So there are two takeoff masses, performance and structural. So out of these two, which is the lesser value? The one uh, maximum structural takeoff mass value. So in the column of takeoff mass, you are going to write 175. You are going to write 175. What is the landing mass? Now again, landing mass, there are two values given to you: performance limited landing mass and structurally limited landing mass. So out of these two values, you are going to select that value which is the lesser one. So 1 lakh 5,000 and 1 lakh 10,000. So out of these two values, the performance limited landing mass is the lesser value. So I'm going to write here 105. Okay, and add to that trip fuel, which is 36,000. So plus 36. Zero fuel weight, which is 1,22,000 or 122, plus you are going to add fuel on board or takeoff fuel. So takeoff fuel is how much? 40,000. So add 40. So 105 plus 36, 141, 122 plus 40 is 162. So out of these three takeoff values, 175, 141 and 162, the least is 141. 141. So you are going to take off with a mass of 141 or 141, 1,41,000 kg. So step number 2 is takeoff mass equals to dry operating mass plus payload plus fuel on board or your takeoff fuel. Substitute the values. Takeoff mass is what? 141. So write 141 here. Dry operating mass is 65,000 or 65. Payload we have to calculate. Fuel on board is 40,000 or takeoff fuel is 40,000. So add 40. Therefore, payload equals to 141 minus 65 plus 40. So 141 minus 105. So 141 minus 105 is 36. Payload is 36,000 kg. 36,000 kg. So the correct answer is Bravo. That is, what is the maximum allowable traffic load if maximum takeoff mass, zero fuel mass, landing mass, dry operating mass, takeoff fuel or fuel on board and trip fuel is given. So let's start with doing our step number 1, which is make 3 columns, one for takeoff mass, the second one for landing mass and the third one is your zero fuel mass. Now in the column of takeoff mass, you have to write the takeoff mass which is given in the question, 1,75,000. So write 175. The column of landing mass, you will write the landing mass given 110 plus trip fuel which is equal to 34,000 or 34. The column of zero fuel mass, you will write the zero fuel mass. Maximum zero fuel mass is 1 lakh. So write 100 plus takeoff fuel or fuel on board. So fuel on board is, or takeoff fuel is 39,000. So write 39. 139 is the answer here. 110 plus 34, 144 and this is 175. So out of this three takeoff values, you have to select that takeoff value which is the lowest. So out of these three, the lowest is 139. 139. So 139 is your regulated takeoff mass. 139 is nothing but 1,39,000 kg. 1,39,000 kg. Now step number 2 is use direct formula. So step number 2, takeoff mass equals to DOM plus payload plus fuel on board. So therefore, the takeoff mass is 139. So therefore, 139 equals to dry operating mass, which is 65,000 or 65. Payload we have to calculate plus fuel on board. So fuel on board is how much? 39,000. Takeoff fuel. So plus 39. Therefore, payload equals to 139 minus 65 plus 39. Therefore, payload equals to 139 minus 65 plus 39. So 65 plus 39 is 104. Payload will be equal to 34 or 34,000 kg. So the correct answer will be option delta, which is 35. So 139 minus 104 is 35. Yeah, so 35,000 kg. 35,000 kg. So this is how you do this first 5 sums from the Keith Williams. We will do the remaining questions. We will do the next 5 questions in the next video lecture. So I hope you have understood these 5 questions very well, and I suggest that you practice these questions so as to gain confidence. I'll see you in the next video lecture. Keep practicing.